In this video, I'm checking out one of the most hotly anticipated entry-level IEMs of late 2020. This is the Shuoer Tape Pro. Now the Tape Pro here is a hybrid dual driver unit. It has one dynamic driver for the bass and it has one electrostatic driver for the mids and treble, or estat as some people like to call it. I'm not going to mess around with the stats or the specs. I'll just say it's got a sensitivity of 105 dB and impedance of 16 ohms. And yeah, that's about it. I do like the way they've upgraded the packaging since the original model. The original one came in this kind of weird cylinder. This looks like a much more polished and definitely more premium package. And in addition, the first one came in a sort of very generic metal cylinder, circular case. Now the Tape Pro comes with the same case that we saw on the Shuoer Singer, which surprisingly was their budget model. Let's move right now on to the physicalities as always, and then later on we'll talk about the sound. So here are the earpieces, and before we do that, actually, I'm just going to cover the cable quickly. These come with a 2-pin connector, and we're going to move in a bit closer. Okay. So here's the cable, and this is a beautiful cable. This is actually one of my favorite cables in this price range. It is a silver-plated monocrystalline copper cable. 2-pin, of course, like I said. It's got your preformed ear guides, nice and thick and strong, and it handles well. It has minimal microphonics. It's got just a tiny little Y splitter there and a small transparent chin slider. And what's interesting about this cable is it has a 2.5mm balanced termination, which is quite interesting for something in this price range. But not only that, in the package you also get this 2.5 to 3.5 single-ended adapter, and I really like that addition. I think that is fantastic, and I suspect as we move forward we'll probably see more of this happening. People will over time just come to expect that, and personally I like it. If you are someone who only uses a 3.5mm or an unbalanced source, then you probably going to complain about the length of the plug here, but we'll see what happens. They'll either offer multiple terminations or they will include adapters in the case. But anyway, that is a beautiful little cable. I really like that. So now it's time to move on and have a look at the actual earpieces. And if you're familiar with the old tape, you'll see right away the shape of the shells has not really changed at all. I don't recall if the first model had 2-pin or MMCX. I seem to recall it having MMCX connectors. And if that is the case, I should just check. I've got the old one here somewhere, but if that is the case, I'm happy to see them switch over to the 2-pin, which is my preferred connector. And so we've got the same shell as the original model. Beautiful metal shell, very, very sturdy, somewhat comfortable. I'll come back to that in a moment, but I just want to mention that these the Tape Pro now has tuning filters, and basically all you do is you unscrew these two things here and you swap them over using the included tool, which is still in the box there. But it is a rather fussy and time-consuming little exercise. It can be quite frustrating. It'll test your eyesight, might test your patience because they are quite small and fiddly, but you know, it's nice to have that option. Swapping the filters over does increase the bass amount quite a bit, so if you are a bass head, you'll love that. Otherwise, I think in the stock or default mode that there is ample bass for my preferences. Let's go back to the comfort now, and these are reasonably comfortable for my ears, although I do find that these sharp edges do cause hot spots after a while, and I have to either take a short break after an hour or two, or at least just sort of readjust the fitting in my ears every so often. But apart from that, they're not too bad. Like I said before, the cable is fantastic. And with that said, I guess it's time to move on to how they actually sound, and this is where things get a bit difficult. I've kind of flip-flopped in my opinion of these over the last few weeks, and it's taken me longer than usual to do this review. That's because I just wanted to make sure that I was hearing what I was hearing. When I took them out of the box and had my first listen, I was quite impressed. Initially, especially with the bass, because these have a really cool punchy bass to them. And I thought, hey man, although they did have characteristics that the original tape model had, the tonal balance obviously had been improved somewhat, and you know, out of the box I thought, wow, actually these are going to be really good. And then a couple of days later, you know, I had a quick listen and then I put them away. A couple of days later I went to town and I took them with me, and I was sitting on the train, and you know, after a little while I was thinking, shit, I wish I'd brought something else with me, because I just was not enjoying listening to these on the train. It was just rather unpleasant. You know, the old upper mid-range focus of the original one was there. It sounded quite dry, a little bit chalky for a lack of a better term, and the engagement just wasn't there for me, and I wasn't enjoying it. And then, you know, a few days later I listened again, and this time I changed the source. Like previously I was listening with my Sony Walkman, and then I switched over to the iBasso DX120 and I had a listen. I thought, you know, actually these are pretty good. And then, oh boy, I unboxed the iFi Audio Zen DAC, which there's a review coming soon of. And man, I thought, holy cow, these actually sound really good. But as time went by, I did more and more listening. Long story short, sorry for the rant, but I just kind of discovered that no, they're not quite there yet. They still have that kind of dryness, especially in the upper mid-range, but it really depends a lot on the type of music that you're listening to. For some types of music, these sound fantastic. Like some electronic and maybe some hip-hop and things like that, but for rock music or things with a lot of electric guitars, music that focuses in the upper mid-range can sort of get that upper mid-range glare and harshness to it, and it but I'm getting ahead of myself as usual, and I haven't broken it down yet, so I'm going to start with the bass, which is probably my favorite aspect of the Tape Pro here. They've got a great bass. The sub-bass extension and the reach on these is really good. They do get a nice solid rumble going on. It's very controlled, obviously. Well, I shouldn't say obviously, it's a dynamic driver, but it's a very controlled sub-bass rumble, but it digs pretty deep, and it can shake you up a bit. And in terms of the mid-bass, it's nice and punchy. It's got good impact. It's got a good amount of slam to it. And in terms of the tonal balance, it is ahead of the mid-range, definitely. It's kind of, and it's also ahead of the treble as well. I would say it's kind of in line with the upper mid-range, which we'll get to in a moment. So having said that, let's talk about the mid-range now. And I kind of, I don't know, I'm still not sure what to think about the mid-range here. Sometimes it sounds good, other times it just sounds too dry, and it sounds a little bit too forward and harsh in the upper mids. Female vocals are actually pretty good, you know, but things like electric guitars just sound a little bit, they get on my nerves. I find myself turning the volume down, which is a problem that I had with the original model as well, and other people did. It was that as you turn the volume up, the tonal balance sort of isn't maintained. The upper mids just get more and more ahead and start leaving everything else behind, and I think that happens here as well. So it's just a tough thing to talk about. In some music, the Tape Pro sounds good. Occasionally it sounds great, but for the most part it just sounds, you know, okay or kind of good. So let's move on to the treble, because I'm just butchering this one right now. And the treble has a lower treble focus. That's where most of the action happens. But after sort of 4 or 5 kilohertz, the fall off is pretty rapid, and there's not much going on in terms of the upper treble. And that means that the treble notes are a little bit dry. They don't really sparkle. But the lower treble notes are reasonably forward, and that's partly because they blend into the upper mid-range. But as far as the upper treble goes, there's just not much sparkle or airiness there. It sounds a little bit compressed, a little bit flat. And I just kind of wish that they had, Shuoer that is, had shifted that upper mid-range further up to give a little bit more upper treble focus rather than that upper mid-range glare that these have. And so my description of the sound was a little bit backwards there. I kind of summarized before I broke it down. But to sum it up, these have a great bass, and you know, some people will actually like the sound of these, but for the most part I think they're only okay. I think for the price, what you're getting is acceptable, but not much more than that. There are definitely better options out there for the price, like the FiiO FH3 smashes these. Oh gosh, I can't. Got a mental blank. I can't remember what else is in there at that price range, just because I love the FH3 so much. But for a little bit more, for a bit more money, or perhaps on sale, the NF Audio NM2 Plus is definitely a step above these. And just whatever you could think of. You know what, I would even prefer the Moondrop Starfields over these, and that's just because they do have some good technical qualities, but overall I just don't find them that engaging and that musical. There is something a little bit off still with the upper mid-range focus and the lack of the upper treble. And yeah, they just don't quite do it for me. So I'm not going to recommend these. I will say they are okay, and that's about it really. So that's it for this video, guys. If you liked it, give it a thumbs up, Parfam Audiophile style. And if you're new to the channel and you want to see more reviews like this in the future, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Check out the links in the description for the full written review and all the social media channels and etc. And until next time, I'll see you later.